Okay, everyone, thank you. Thanks for joining us for the second day. We thought we'd start today off with a discussion between myself and Erin Saltman. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Alexander Meleagrou-Hitchens. I'm the co-director of the International Center for the Study of Radicalisation here at King's. We're the hosts of the GNET project, which our plan is to kind of talk to you a little bit about that as well. And I also run a master's program here. I'm actually very happy to see quite a few of our graduates having moved on to great careers. I'll let Erin introduce herself and talk to us a bit about GIFCT, and then talk about GNET a little bit, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I just thought it was helpful to actually have a moment to say, what is this and why? and get some feedback and explain why it's important to have these convenings. I'll use the doctor. I'm Dr. Erin Saltman. I've earned it. I did my time. And I am the director of membership and programming at the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism, or GIFCT, if you heard that acronym being thrown around. And GNET is, in fact, our academic wing. And I guess it's worth putting in context what our organization is and why we would have an academic wing, and why it's really important to try to be, in essence, the connective tissue between the tech sector and the academic sector. As somebody that comes originally from academia, as a former academic, this was something that we would always discuss in rooms, is that you usually have many, many smart people pointing out really good, timely problems that often connected with online factors, or critiqued government, or critiqued other sectors, but actually those sectors weren't getting that information and it wasn't being packaged in a way. So it seemed like there was this sectoral divide, that the people needing that information the most often weren't the ones getting that information to be able to act upon it. Wider to that, why GNET sits within the realm of GIFCT. For those of you that don't know who we are, we're a little bit of a cyborg NGO, in that we were founded in 2017 by tech platforms for tech platforms. So originally we were a tech initiative run between tech companies, founded by Microsoft, Facebook, now Meta, Twitter, now X, and YouTube, to create a space for tech companies to talk to each other about terrorist and violent extremist trends. If you go back the many years to 2017, obviously ISIS or Daesh was the group of the moment that was in all the headlines. And these tech companies were seeing certain trends on their platforms. I was working at Meta at the time. I was the head of dangerous organizations policy covering Europe, Middle East, and Africa. That is not one territory. That is a large chunk of the world. There are many, many different aspects to terrorism and violent extremism. I was in the plane all the time. And there were hard truths about how the trends were both the same in different parts of the world, and then very different and localized in different parts of the world. And we needed a space where tech companies could actually talk to each other, not just in the sidelines of government forums, where usually tech would be invited to go and be critiqued and say, you need to do more. But we were realizing really quickly that you can't do more just as one platform. So even at Facebook at the time, we would see what we thought might look like a recruitment conversation, but you don't really have the strong indicators. And at the moment we thought it was going to be a really strong indicator, they would say, now meet us on Telegram, now talk to us on Rocket Chat, now come to this smaller, less regulated end-to-end encrypted space. So you wouldn't have the full signal. You wouldn't have the data that would say, actually, this is a recruitment network. So GIFCT was founded to create a space for technology, and in the aftermath of the Christchurch call to action, the horrific white supremacy terrorist attacks in New Zealand, by which it was live streamed, by which it went further and faster than any one piece of terrorist content I've ever analyzed, it was decided that actually GIFCT needs to not just be run multilaterally by tech companies, it needs to be an independent nonprofit with its own staff, so that other tech companies can really start joining, and we can have a transparent infrastructure and open dialogue with other sectors. So all of our work is broken down roughly into 3 buckets. Where is this about prevention? Where is this about responding to real world incidents? And where is this about adaptation? And when we talk about prevention, some of that is to say, okay, here's all the tech tools and safety guidance to give civil society and activists to counter extremism, the PVECD space. But actually prevention for a tech company often means preventing the viral spread of known activity, known content, known bad actor behavior, like some of what Gina and our Microsoft colleague talked about yesterday, like what other people touched on. So GIFCT does run a hash sharing database of known violating terrorist content. That currently has, I believe, 2.3 million hashes in it that correspond to roughly 390,000 pieces of distinct content. That includes image, video, text. We do PDF hashing, which does text extraction plus image extraction. We do URL hashing. We do know there's some audio hash files in there as well. So that's a way of sharing signal. That's a more technical product that we run. Now, again, we mentioned yesterday, we covered so much yesterday. We covered ISKP, we covered Hamas, Houthis, alt-right, Hindutva, we covered AI, trends, ethics, we covered crypto, DAOs, 3D, printing, drones. I can give you a tool to find you a signal. And if you don't have the context around that signal, your moderators won't know that they should remove that. If you see a Sonengrad, Black Sun, if you see I'll bet maybe roughly what the ISIS logo looks like. I'll bet for every other terrorist organization, most people are not fluent in that, or the media wings of even a group that's known like ISIS. So it's the context around those tools that really matters. And even in incident response work. So we run an incident response protocol for our 30+ tech company platforms that are members, which is really diverse. We have all the big ones like the Microsofts, the Googles, the Amazons, but we also have really small platforms like Just Paste It, run by one guy in Poland. He's really nice. ISIS loved his platform. Or smaller developing platforms like, we've got Discord at the table, or gaming platforms like Niantic is at the table. They made Pokemon Go. Airbnb, that's a really different question of online, offline threat. And all of these platforms are asking similar questions where they might say, hey, I'm starting to go into sub-Saharan Africa, what do I need to know about the region? Or, hey, we're about to make some of our products in marketplace with e-payments, and what do we know about crypto and how that might be abused? And even this year, we've been working with GNET a lot to say, here's what tech company is asking us questions about. Can you mine this from the academic community? Can you have insights that we can bring forward so that they have connection to the academics that are writing about this? Including this year, especially things like election integrity. Things like the Paris Olympics, things like everyone's talking about AI. What does that mean in real terms? What does our imagination say that could be for exploitation? But what are we already practically seeing as exploitation? So GNET is a 4th year conference. Cannot believe we're already in the 4th year. But we did put a call out for proposals saying, someone come to us and build a wing of academic knowledge so that we can bridge that gap between tech and academic experts. And it's been incredible to see that really flourish. And that is really part of that adaptation side, but also that prevention side. So the more you can know, the more you can adapt, and that more that you prevent bad things from happening in the future. So I see GNET really as those crucial links, both on the prevent and the adapt side of the spectrum. I mean, we've asked a lot of you. I'd love to push it back to you in this fireside chat and be like, we've asked you to evolve a lot, and I feel like you've always been willing to be malleable, which is not always an academic trait, by the way. Like, we've really tried to bend the mold a little bit. So back to you on some of the things we forced you into in the last year.
Well, look, and I think what some of you may notice in our output, which I'll talk about in a bit, is it's sort of in that space between a journal article and an op-ed or a sort of an analysis you might read in a more mainstream publication. We try to have that academic rigor, but make it accessible to a number of audiences. I think there's kind of two groups of people that we try to serve. And I think, of course, one is advising technology companies how their platforms are being exploited and used, sometimes responding to requests, other times telling them things they don't know. We try to pick up, and if you follow our insights, we try to pick up on quite niche, movements and groups and environments that may not be on the radar. But yes, also reacting to requests. And of course, the big focus is on how violent extremist behaviors translate from online to the real world, and the kind of interaction between those things, and that changes so quickly. We try to be nimble with reacting to that, and really, we also rely on our contributors, our external contributors, and the people that we commission. So one of our big jobs is to just know who's out there and being able to reach out to them. And of course, if there's people in the audience or listening online, we're always very open to suggestions. You know, we're very accessible via email, via social media. If there's things you want us to know about or work you're doing, and you maybe not have a platform, you may be from part of the world that's not getting much attention, we're very keen to hear from you. And the other thing is, the other audience, of course, is, like many people in this room, just experts and researchers that we're trying to help inform and connect with each other and with various tech platforms, but also looking at how efforts to mitigate extremist use of these platforms are actually impacting extremists, how they're reacting, what they're doing about it, how they're adapting, and also how those efforts that we make or the tech companies make interact with social concerns that we talked about a bit yesterday, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, human rights. How do we get that balance? There's no easy answer to that. And actually, I'll probably end the discussion a bit later on with a discussion on that question. You know, how do we balance this, you know, existence of extremism and terrorism in a free society? You know, can we expect to be 100% safe from it? Probably not. And, you know, we're not just looking, of course, and when we started, it was a lot of it was, and still is, of course, to an extent, you know, social media platforms, online platforms. But as we saw yesterday, quite interested as well now, especially this year, on hard tech, of course, 3D weapons and drones. But there's probably other stuff out there that we're not yet on top of. And also the software that runs these things. We're also very interested in how that works, how that can be better monitored, maybe disrupted as well. How from the beginning, and I think it was talked about a bit yesterday, when they're developing these materials, how they can integrate the consideration of how it can be exploited before introducing it. So maybe being more involved in the early stages going forward would be useful. And yeah, so I think the conference so far has reflected our interest this year. AI, hard tech, and election interference, which we'll talk about in the next panel. And yes, so I think, you know, one of the other things we're interested in hearing, I think that we wanted to talk about was just the kind of general output for us. I think this year alone, so one of the main products for us is, of course, our insights. These are the kind of relatively short form analyses. I think we published about 47 of those so far this year, probably around, you know, I have to impress the people who are funding us. So I'm going to give her some good numbers. About 600, I think we've published so far, all together since we started. About 16 countries covered this year alone, dozens over the last few years. And I think, you know, around 21 different nationalities represented in the authors. Again, at least 50 to 60 total. I was asking Fola, even on the conference so far, most of the continents have been represented, I think, at least the inhabited ones.
Antarctica's a little,
yeah, I
a little
think
short there on.
maybe next year.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think the last thing on just the kind of new products that we're trying to put out, you know, it's not just written materials. We want to kind of make our output more accessible beyond, you know, people who may not have the time or desire to sit and read, you know, 2,000 word analyses. Largely thanks to Fola and Bell's efforts, we've started a webinar series. We've run 3 of those so far. Those are kind of live online events with researchers, academics about their ongoing or completed research on certain topics. We've covered AI and gaming so far. Those are live, and they also allow for a good Q&A. We've had a couple hundred already attending on that. Hopefully some of you in this audience have been part of that, and thank you for supporting those. And a podcast, we've done one so far with Jacob Fodu on AI and extremism, again run by Fola. That's of course pre-recorded and more informal kind of discussion. So we're trying to diversify the output a little bit, and we're thinking of other ways to do that. The last thing, again, reflecting our desire to open up the space to early career researchers, again, ideally as well, people who from regions that, at least in the kind of Western terrorism, extremism studies, still remain kind of less heard from and underrepresented. We're running a fellowship that you may have seen. We've advertised for, and we're taking applications for right now. It's a year-long GNET consultancy fellowship where we're looking to highlight, again, some underrepresented voices, and just generally and we're not only looking for early career, by the way. I mean, we're looking for a big range, early career to kind of more established PhD researcher, academic, and that time they would work with us for around a year, help us expand our network to where they're based, write stuff for us, at least I think 4 or 5 insights in the year, but also arrange events, research projects, and hopefully a beginning of a wider network.
Yeah, and I mean, to jump in off of that, because I'm being ageist in my eyesight. I'm nearsighted, so I can see you better with these glasses on, but like there are some early career people in the audience, and I've already talked to at least 5 people that clearly have imposter syndrome, but that have their finger on the pulse of some really amazing, creepy trends online that I want to know more about. So like, please, you are here for a reason. I wish I had the time to directly have my finger on the pulse of the creepy trends that you're currently tracking. So the more you become, I still think I'm in my prime, but in tech years, I'm a wise old sage. And if you are doing a master's or a PhD and you are following a trend and collecting data, you always make the assumption that somebody else knows more or is tracking more, or is tracking that thing. And maybe, but maybe not. So please do write an amazing insight about some of the strange things you're seeing, or go and see what's already been written about that, and then see if you're plugging a gap, because often those early years you actually have the time and space to track that thing more directly in a way that as you are more established, it looks different for what you're tracking or the type of research you're bringing to the table. So don't underestimate the things that you are seeing and tracking, and try to put that into 1,000 to 2,000 words. And the amount of times that, what's amazing now with this kind of discography of insights is that we will have not just platforms, but governments come to us now too, and they'll kind of like throw out anything on that extremism tech nexus. They'll be like, decentralized web servers, neo-Nazis. I was like, give me any 2 words you got, I will find you 5 insights. Like, and Belle has been great, and Maddie before her, where they'll send us a little annotated bibliography being like, here's the 5 insights written in the last 2 years. I was just in Brazil last month. We were running one of our regional workshops, and I was like, give me your LATAM stuff. And sure enough, there was a page with all the links of like, okay, well, here's how we're looking at Uruguay, Paraguay, and Brazil and the crime terror nexus. And here's how it has overlap both for Islamist extremism and far right extremism. Like, I feel shielded and protected knowing that when anyone is like, you should do more, I'm like, we are trying, and that is true. And we can always say tech should do more. But I'm constantly, the knowledge is an armor to feel like you are stronger and being more proactive in the space of actually being able to go understand the signal, make better moderation choices. It is hard. The amount of content online is completely a Sisyphean task. Like, there was a question yesterday of like, should we be satisfied? Never. We did not get into this field because we are people that can ever be satisfied. We chose the hardest topic and the hardest sector, and we're here for it. Total masochists, but it's so amazing to see people contributing to that knowledge space, because it does have an effect. Believe me, your platforms would look a million times worse if we weren't doing anything. And the fact that things still get by is something we're constantly working on, but it is crazy. You have, guys, you don't know what it would look like if nothing was happening. And I know my tech people in the room, because they're like, with their traumatized faces. But it is like, we can never be satisfied. We wake up every morning being unsatisfied. And we usually have good therapists because of it. So like, not to trauma bond with you, but we care. But it's really nice to know you can do something in a state where sometimes you look at things in the world and you think, gosh, I can't do anything. Actually working on this, we're doing whatever little bits we can do on a constant basis to make it better.
Yeah, just to add on this question of the materials finding their way on there still. And I think there's 2 challenges, and I think one of the questions from yesterday about, should we accept some level of this? I think there's 2 challenges. One, the stuff that slips through, the way they trick their way onto the platform. We published on this a bit last year. We had Mustafa Ayad speak a bit on it. He's published an insight since, just the kind of embedding ISIS or extremist materials onto non-extremist output, masquerading as independent news agencies, scribbling, sort of tricking and putting someone mentioned putting a Netflix logo on something, kind of tricking their way through with very extreme illegal or terms of service violating material. So that's one thing, and we're on top of that, but things will get through. But then there's the other challenge, right, of the extreme, problematic, harmful, maybe even dangerous material that is not illegal, that may not even violate terms of service, and that's, you know, that speaks just a bigger challenge. You know, if you speak to people whose job it is to stop terrorism in this country or in the West, they don't tell you that they're going to expect to have 100% success rate. You can't have that in an open, free society. I'm not even sure you necessarily want to live in a place where it's, you know, that safe, because what it would take and the infringement it would take on your rights and on your existence may not be worth it. It's a difficult balance. And I think the same thing you would have to say about ideas and views and ideologies that one might consider harmful or extreme or dangerous. We cannot be 100% protected from those. And so, of course, you've got the mitigation measures, you remove stuff, but then you've got this ability to actually still maintain a presence. So in my own research, if I look at how jihadists are continuing to operate on major platforms, ISIS supporters, there's a guy called Ahmed Musa Jibril, for example, in Michigan. He's American, very extremely popular preacher among ISIS supporters. Anyone who follows ISIS supporters online in the West will know him. He's got a huge presence on pretty much all the major mainstream platforms, hundreds of thousands of views, huge amounts of followers. I follow his work closely. I find it very interesting. And it is, without a doubt, if in the certain context, it is an endorsement for supporting jihadism. But he's not breaking the law. I'm not even sure he'd be breaking the law outside of the United States, where you've got much more enshrined freedom of speech. But there's a lot of nodding and winking to very extreme ideas. And that's the kind of thing they will continue to be able to find ways to survive. And our job there as researchers, as people assisting the companies, is to, of course, some stuff be removed, but other things, just providing the explanation of why it's a problem, empowering people to understand why this is actually quite dangerous, why maybe even if we have to accept that it's going to be there because we cannot be 100% safe. There are issues with this. Here's the context. Here's why this is a problem. And you can say that there's plenty of extreme right wing, which in a way it's even easier for the extreme right to continue operating because their messages link with a lot of more mainstream concerns, and they're able to kind of exploit it even more effectively. So in those cases, it's not just take it down, but raise awareness about it, let people understand the problem, why it is dangerous, and maybe just there is. And when we say accepting it, it's not saying it's not sort of passive thing, but it's to say it's understanding that you're never going to be able to fully protect yourself from ideas you don't like.
I mean, yeah, I would actually say that I don't think most of us would work in this field if we accepted any of it. We don't like morally accept it. We understand the data, which is that things will always break through, but we are absolutely unaccepting of it and are not being passive about it. So it is a question of, when can I build a policy that allows me to remove this? When can I build a policy that allows me to downrank, demonetize, put a sensitivity marker on it? But even those decisions, when we're like, but it's extreme, so downrank it, you still have to have a policy justification and a system for labeling what is downranked. So it's not actually always easier to just downrank something. And then when is it? Yes, we have the term lawful but awful or legal extremism. We don't have to accept it. The research that exploits why it is linked to extremism and a gateway towards hate-based ideologies also feeds into lots of other activists that are doing prevention, redirection, counter narratives. And there's been some really innovative work there in the last 10 years with really good, usually when a great NGO partners with a great academic network, you get that launch, measurement, evaluation, feed that back in, and you get a really nice partnership inside. Like actually the trifecta of super empowerment is when you get a tech company platform that will partner with an NGO that partners with the academic, so that you get the access to the platform, the really localized, fantastic narratives, and then the measurement and evaluation side of it. And it doesn't happen as much as I'd love in my Christmas wish list, but we do have examples where that's happened on some of the bigger platforms, and it's definitely an area that we can scale. I mean, I wonder, the other gateway that we want to blow the doors off of metaphorically, we can't say that, we study terrorism, not really blow any doors off anything. We want to blow the doors off of how you collect data, which is oftentimes violating, if not illegal, and then how we get that signal in a more considered way directly to networks of platforms. Can we touch on Read?
Yes. So the last thing to talk about, I suppose, would be a separate project that we were running that we currently run at ICSR, the repository of extremist aligned documents. Essentially, this is a curated archive of primary source, mostly hard right, white supremacist terrorist material. And its initial idea, and what it mostly does still, and it's free for anyone to register as long as they have the right credentials, it is a sort of safe, controlled way to access these materials. And so instead of having to dig around in the sort of mud of the most extreme right-wing online world, that part's been done for you. And you can access it in a way that is, maybe healthier, and hopefully opening it up to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to, and opening up access to these materials to people who can really contribute their own ideas and analysis. And then from that database, we've started helping, and you've already talked about hashing, helping to label these materials so they can add to your database, and help all the companies work together to identify these materials early on. And we've also very kindly, GIFCT have kindly agreed to help fund some of this work and partner with it, and help us, one, to actually label all the material that we already have, and with any luck in the near future, become a service of sort of live monitoring of this material, live hashing, so that things are quite quickly responded to. And we're very open to people who are willing to share materials they have that they think we should add to this archive. We may even be able to help you label it. And yes, so if you are interested in that, please do also reach out to me or to anyone on the team, and we can take the discussion further.
Yeah, and this is exciting to me because, to date, GNET has really contributed to that qualitative context that is needed for tech companies to make better downstream moderation decisions. But this feeds into the technical side of turning what is ultimately a one-to-one signal, like you as one researcher have found one creepy, possibly illegal thing on one platform. And if we hash it, it means it becomes a one-to-many signal. So it means you can actually amplify and have a multiplier effect of how that signal might be proactively surfaced, reviewed, and possibly actioned across a myriad of platforms. So it makes that kind of moderation effort scaled. Now, I'm a taxonomy nerd. There's a few of us in this room. It's not the sexiest part of the business. Taxonomies and labeling is oftentimes grueling, but I know lots of researchers as well that when we started talking to them, we were like, and how do you label the content you're collecting? And people will usually be quite broad and be like, I have a file that says Nazi. That's not going to be specific enough for us. I might get stuff from the History Channel, I don't know. So this is the baby steps that we're going to be working towards in the next year. And we're actually going to do a workshop. If anyone's at the Terrorism and Social Media Conference at TASM, we're going to do a workshop with researchers to have you start telling us more about how you label, how you collect, what it looks like, to say like, okay, here's how we label. It's going to be there's some circles where there's going to be that sweet spot in the middle where you are finding some stuff that actually already fits our taxonomy. And this year we're also questioning our taxonomy and whether it should be expanded. But let's get some of that signal you're finding, if you want it to actually have that impact online in a multiplier effect, let's get it hashed. Let's make sure that signal exists. And so it's kind of GIFCT creating for the first time its own trusted flagger portal. You don't have to be the techie that knows how to hash technology. We have that. We're going to work with Read to build it. But I think that's a really exciting next step, again, of bridging that gap between all this knowledge and stuff that you guys are finding and making it truly actionable. That is the sweet spot. So it's why this is not just a nice thing to have. It's actually a really actionable and helpful thing to have.
Yeah, so quite a few things to look forward to just this year, and of course going forward. I will leave it at that. We were hoping to take some questions, but we've already gone over and into the time for the next panel. So we're gonna, and in fact, we were supposed to end 5 minutes early to let the team set up, but
we suck. So, we can't fire each other. We're like kind of.
So we'll leave it at that. Thank you. Next panel coming right up. Thank you.